The election is April 10th, so I've asked the candidates here. All four have agreed to join us. So, gentlemen, if you would take your places at the table. Our moderator, John Cohen, is going to explain the rules and how we're going to conduct the forum. I have put together a list of questions. I've solicited community input, and I've based the questions on my knowledge of our community as well as the input from other people. The candidates drew numbers earlier to determine the order of questioning, and Mr. Cohen will explain that. Oh, and excuse me, Bruce Foreman from Studio Stage had one announcement.
I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank David for putting this all together. This guy's fantastic. I'm over here at Studio Stage, and they were over there, and thank you so much for being here.
All right, George Marsh is our timekeeper for the evening. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Cohen, and he will lead us through this. There will be time at the end for additional conversation with the candidates and any other questions you may have. Yes, sir?
Can we turn the buzz down?
Sure.
Do
Nelson? Nelson, which of these fixtures is buzzing? Do we know?
I thought it was me.
Oh, I know you're on a buzz, but
Yeah.
that's a different story. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Cohen, your show.
Well, I'm glad we made it a bit more romantic in here, so it's a much more cozy environment. First of all, I want to welcome all of you. I want to thank David and Elizabeth and the Tellefson Park Association. It kind of feels like we're in New Hampshire because this is the first of the candidates' forums and debates. And it just shows you that all politics, especially in Culver City, is retail. There were these cards that are at the front. Elizabeth, will you hold them up for me, please? If you have candidate questions, you can go ahead and give them to Elizabeth, and they'll then give them to me, and I'll do my best to work them in to our format this evening. So what we're going to do is as follows. Each of the candidates has drawn a number at random, and they all are not necessarily sitting in the order in which they drew numbers, but I'll tell you what they are, and we won't necessarily stay in that order. We'll be a little bit more random as we go through the evening. Mr. Tiggs drew number 1, which means he'll be the first to go this evening. Mr. Lee drew number 2. Mr. Vera was number 3, and Mr. Fish is number 4. The way we're going to work this net spot, not by any means as to where they're going to be on the ballot. Each of the candidates initially will have an opening introduction. Each will have 3 minutes. And as I indicated, we've already drawn the numbers. Then what I will do is I will pose questions to each of the candidates. Initially, it was going to be 3 minutes to answer. I thought that was a bit lengthy and a little bit too long. Now each will have 2 minutes to answer the initial question. And then each of the candidates will have 1 minute to make a rebuttal if they wish, or to add to that. But again, try to stay on topic as best you can. We'll go through all of that for 90 minutes, and then we'll try to set aside adequate time for all of the candidates to give a closing remark for 2 minutes to give you their best sales pitch as to why you ought to vote for them. Now, I know that we may not get to all of your questions this evening. I know that the candidates will probably be here afterward. They'll be glad to take your questions. Don't stay too long. They may ask you for money. Even worse, they may ask you for your vote. So with that, let's get started. Mr. Tiggs, you have drawn number 1, and we'd like to have your opening introduction and your best argument for why we ought to be voting for you.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
And before I go, one full disclosure, please. I apologize. One is I do not vote in Culver City. I have no dog in this race. I live in the hated jurisdiction of Los Angeles, so I'm not registered in Culver City. And then by full disclosure, let me also say that I do have an affiliation with both Mr. Tiggs and with Mr. Vera. I don't like either one of them. But we do share an affiliation in the Culver City Exchange Club, both of which they are members. I don't know whether their dues are up to date or not, so I may be collecting from them as well. Mr. Tiggs.
Thank you, John. Thanks everyone for coming. formed, so I'm kind of excited to be here. And I'd like you to get to know me a little bit. I've lived in Culver City for about 26 years with my family. It was because of the schools, the parks, the people. This is a small town environment. When we moved to Culver City, I really wasn't active. I was just enjoying all those nice things. Then I decided, I talked to a close confidant, and I said, you know, maybe I should apply to be on a commission. Then that confidant said to me, Marcus, you really haven't done anything. I said, well, yeah, I have. You know, I go to the gym, I talk to people, this and that. He said, that's not enough. And I said, well, what do I need to do? He said, number one, you haven't really lived here that long. You've only been here like 8 years. So from then, after that 8-year period, I said, I need to become more active. So what I did is I applied for a commission. Planning commission for 2 terms. I was a chair. In addition to that, Fiesta La Bayona committee. I've been on that for about 14 years. I was a chair twice, 2016 and 2017. You probably ask, why were you the chair twice? Well, I was a chair twice because no one else wanted to be the chair. So I said, okay, I'm gonna roll up my sleeves and I'll be the chair again. The reality is, I've given to this community, I believe in the community. In addition to that, I'm on the Centennial Celebration Committee. As we all know, we celebrated our 100-year anniversary, if you will, in our city. Fortunately, I was selected to be the time capsule subcommittee chair. In addition to that, I'm on the Culver City Unified School Bond, Citizen School Bond Oversight Committee. I've done a lot, and you don't vote for me because I've done a lot, and I'm not asking for that, but I'm just kind of letting you know my background and what I've done for this city. I'd like to be elected as a council member for our city because it's about you and us. It's our city. We need to make our city as best as possible. I think if I'm elected, I will be able to do that. I will listen to what you have to say. I'm not going to come in with any preconceived ideas, but I'm going to listen to both sides of an argument. Lastly, I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, combat veteran. I was a battalion commander where I was responsible for the lives of 700 soldiers, daughters, husbands, etc. And thank you very much, and I encourage tough questions because I'm here to answer them. Thank you.
Folks, I'm going to ask you to hold your applause, but I also want to point out our timekeeper here in the front row. Stand up, please. He actually is not holding up prompting signs for the candidates, but actually giving them green and yellow and red stop signs so they know when they have time left to go.
They're really bad.
We couldn't afford a hook. All right, Mr. Lee, your opening statement.
Sure. I was hoping to work some cowbell into my intro. I guess we can do without that. My name is Daniel Lee. I've lived in Culver City for the last 15 years. One of the reasons that I'm running for city council, the reasons that I put myself in service to other individuals in general, is the example set by my grandmother. I was born in Alabama. I grew up in Florida. I'm a very country boy, as you can tell by my accent. My grandmother was the matriarch of our family. She took care of all of us. In addition to my incredibly extended family, in which my cousins are like brothers and sisters, and there are at least 30 birthdays to remember each year, not counting aunts and uncles. My grandmother also took care of the community in general. If someone had an ailing relative who was sick, she brought them food. If someone had a sibling or a son or a daughter who had been involved with the criminal justice system, she went to visit them in prison. And that's the example that she passed forward to both her children, my mom and my aunts and uncles, and to myself. One of the examples of the ways that I've done that in Culver City is for the last 14 years, the Young Storytellers program. I've volunteered at El Rincon Elementary, both as a mentor and an actor in their program. For the last 7 years, I've been on the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee. I've been a chair of the committee as well. A number of years, I actually independently started a program at the Teen Center to teach teens there about some of the social justice history that they don't get in schools. Professionally, I'm technically a social worker and a filmmaker. My current job is at the James Lawson Institute. I work with Irvin Lawson and Dr. Mary King, who's a former member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the South. We give strategic trainings around the country. We did one in October here in Los Angeles. Our next one is in Nashville in March. My real pitch for myself for the city is that I think a lot of people come from very specific backgrounds when they get into politics. And I think we need a bit more variety. My variety and my chosen career field is focused on empathy. And I think we need a lot more of this. Our current city council person and former mayor, Jim Clark, talked about a city of kindness. And I think it's great to talk about that, but I think in terms of policy, the city needs to reflect that a bit more and needs to provide more venues for people in different neighborhoods to actually be heard, whether that's, you know, about a changing a stoplight or a new development coming in. So the focus of my campaign is us, is Culver City. It's not just me, and I'm here to work with anyone who's willing to work with me.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Vera, your opening statement, please.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to first of all thank David and Elizabeth for hosting this, and all of you guys who are coming out and participating. I hope through the evening and our conversation you get to know me a little better, and I get to know some of you guys a little better, and the questions and wants and needs that you have for our city. My involvement in the city has been long and extensive. I own Storrington Italian Market in Culver City. It's been in the family for 50-something years plus. I currently still own and operate it. In terms of the city involvement, I'm on the board of directors of Upward Bound House, with the board of directors of YMCA, Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Exchange Club with that gentleman over there, unfortunately. But
We'll have her cross to bear.
indeed. I believe the city is really at a crucial turning point. We have a lot of development going on. With that development, though, comes a price. And the price is, I believe, that Culver City is losing its identity. We really need to work hard and be smart about development, where we put it and where we don't put it. I don't want us to fall into the trap of us losing everything that I really fell in love with about the city and have us become sort of another city that I won't mention any names. My entire family really right now lives in Culver City. My cousins, my aunt. Culver City has been wonderful to me. You know, for you guys who don't know, I had my difficulties in life. I became addicted to drugs. I went to jail, did a lot of things that I'm really not proud of. But as a result of that, and by the grace of God, I am where I am today. It made me a stronger person, it made me more passionate, and the desire that I have to serve my community is unending. Through that, I believe that this city really, it gave me everything. The compassion that the city showed me and the willingness to re-invite me into the community and become one it's just amazing. I believe that really there is no me, it's about we. And through the store, actually, it really gives me a unique opportunity to meet different people from the city. You know, they'll come in every day, hey Albert, we have this problem over here. You know, whatever part of the neighborhood they're in, they come in, and I feel I really have my heart on the, I mean, my finger on the pulse of a lot of different communities, a lot of different areas of the city where I can really get involved and show my support. Anyway, that's it in a nutshell. Looking forward to answering all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Fish, your opening remarks.
Hello, Tellefson Park, and hello, all of Culver City. In 27 days, all of Culver City will find out that my name is Hardin Alexander Fish. So you get the preview. It'll show up on the ballot. But everyone, I've been Alex Fish ever since I was a little kid in Camarillo, California. I'm the Culver City pup in the room. I've only been here a homeowner for 13 years. I have 2 kids in Culver City schools right now. And you know, I chose Culver City with my wife. We could have lived anywhere in the Los Angeles area, but this is the place. We knew it then, we knew where it was headed, and this is the time and place that we want to be. I'm currently the chair of the city's Committee on Homelessness, one of the hardest working committees and probably sort of least understood in the city. We have an amazing group of people working on that committee, and we've actually taken policy from idea to reality right here in the city. Last year, or about a year and a half ago, LA County, recognizing the explosion of people experiencing homelessness throughout the county, now the number is 57,000 people, issued 47 strategies that were empirically based, that were working together, could do the most to actually get people off the streets. And we found that right away. We did the research on how cities could partner. We drafted a resolution and got City Council to approve it, to partner with the county, and we started making policy right away that is now reality. We've created programs that provide rapid rehousing for families who have just slipped into homelessness. We created a pilot program that helps families that are on the cusp of homelessness and keeps them off the precipice. We revived a small program to provide life safety grants to seniors in their homes to keep them in their homes here in Culver City. We have drafted an ordinance that is in staff's hands right now and is being researched that will give greater economic opportunities for people trying to get off the streets and into the workforce. Same for disabled veteran-owned businesses, and the same for small local businesses. We are right now with Dr. Ira Diamond putting together a landlord incentive program to help people who have housing choice vouchers but can't deal with the exploding rents in Culver City get into houses off the streets. Of course, those are all just a small part of the housing issue, and I'm sure there's not enough time in a forum like this to really talk about the whole housing issue. But the immediacy of the housing issue is a big part of why I'm running. I'm also a member of Rancho Higuera Neighborhood Association, Marcus. We founded that, and within a year, we already have a traffic management plan that we're working on with the city where we obtained $1.1 million of funding from the city to put it into reality. My personal background is I'm a graduate of UCLA Law School, top 10 in my class. I clerked for a Ninth Circuit judge for a year, then worked in corporate law and was a shareholder of my firm, and left that to enter public service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fish. And all the candidates will get an opportunity to revisit some of these issues in their closing remarks. Let's dig in. With the passage of Prop 64, the legalization of recreational marijuana here in California, it's not only a statewide question, but it's also one that I think has become a rather difficult and labyrinth type question for local decision makers. Can you identify for us some of the ways in which you would address these issues and what you see some of the challenges are to the city of Culver City in addressing the legalization of cannabis in our community? Let's start with you, Mr. Lee.
Sure. So for me, I actually think that the process that the city has currently gone through in regards to marijuana legalization, whether that be medicinal or recreational, has actually been very good. There has been a lot of instances where residents and stakeholders and businesses can voice their opinion in terms of input, in terms of where these facilities should be located, what type of facilities they should be. And the City Council has done a very good job of listening both to the business interests who might bring in revenue streams to the city through the sale of recreational marijuana, but also to people like residents of Fox Hills who wanted to make sure that these facilities were not concentrated in their neighborhood, and to other residents who wanted to make sure that these facilities were not located close to parks or schools. If you look at the map that the city actually came down with in their final evaluation, there are very few places where either a dispensary or a warehouse facility can actually be located. with the plethora of dispensaries for medicinal use that are already available across the street in Los Angeles City, I think that is a great way to go. And I think with the multitude of research that actually suggests that marijuana, one, is not a gateway drug, and two, is less harmful than alcohol, I don't think we should be afraid of these facilities. I think we should make sure that the city does as much as it can to make sure that the new revenue that is generated by legal marijuana goes into the city coffers in Culver City and not in Los Angeles.
Thank you. Let's go on to you, Mr. Vera.
I believe that the city really is doing a great job on it. I disagree with it altogether. Me personally, I'm not a proponent of having dispensaries in the city whatsoever. I believe it really provides the wrong atmosphere, an atmosphere that I don't know that I would want to subject our residents to. It's an all-cash business. At the drop of a dime, something will go wrong, and it's not worth a single life. It's not. I believe if we have it, let's make the most money then on it. I believe the city is leaving money on the table in terms of the taxation. Let's go with the highest possible taxation on it. I understand their philosophy saying that we want to charge low taxation to bring in the quality businesses. Well, I believe that the businesses are going to come. They're going to want to come, so let's make the most of it. In talking to some friends of mine that work for LAPD, statistically speaking, they said crime in areas where dispensaries are up 22%. There are strong arm robberies, snatch and grab. It's an all-cash business. It's a business that I don't think we should bring into Culver City. A lot of cities around us are just going delivery only. I believe that's the way Culver City should have approached it, but that ship has sailed, so let's make the most money on it that we possibly can, and being as safe as possible. Thank you.
Mr. Fish?
I think the council has done a good job also balancing the competing interests. There's been a lot of time expended, and there's so much business coming up for city council, so many challenges to face. I'd hate to retread the ground that the council's already covered. It's the amount of dispensaries is fairly limited. The other facilities are probably going to be invisible. I think the key with the dispensaries and the entire program, I think we should be following the advice of public health professionals who say destigmatize cannabis, but do not normalize cannabis. We have to make sure that we're not perpetuating the failed war on drugs in this small category of marijuana. But we also have to not, a large problem that you encounter on the streets of Los Angeles is the recreational open use. While I want our police to be sensitive to and avoid targeted policing or discriminatory policing, I do want to make sure that we don't have open use in the streets. That's normalizing, and I think that's bad for society and for our children. But it is a many-faceted thing. I think that Culver City should consider advocating for the expungement of the criminal records for people who have been convicted solely for marijuana crimes. If they don't have a violent crime, if they don't have other crimes, I think that we need to take a small step towards healing the enormous damage that we've done by caging people for simply using marijuana, and we need to consider using the small platform we have to encourage the district attorney to expunge those records. Otherwise, I think the taxation level is about right, and there will be a ballot measure on this, so you all get a chance to weigh in on it. The key is if you increase the taxes too much, you're going to drive it back underground. When we have 3 dispensaries in this city, there will be 3 places where you know that marijuana is being sold. At the moment, there are probably 1,000 where you don't know where they're being sold, and those are also little cash businesses that are not taxed. Thanks.
Mr. Tibbs?
Whether cannabis or weed is a gateway drug or not, I don't know. I mean, we all can have different opinions on it. As far as how the council dealt with it, it was definitely a deliberate process. There's no doubt the council spent a lot of hours, staff hours, council members' hours to figure this out. I am amazed, though, how with this, council was able to come up with an ordinance within eight months or so, compared to other things. That being said, my original opinion on cannabis in Culver City was, I don't use, but if people use it, they use it. But I thought that we need to regulate the heck out of those operators. But then with the deliberate process, and again, council worked really hard, they took testimony, they listened to people, they come up with three retail locations, if you will. But when you do look at the map, there are some neighborhoods that are not impacted by it. And when I was walking, talking to voters, I said, well, if a cannabis shop was down the street from you, would you be okay with it? They said, not really. And when I talked to other people, they said, well, even if it's not in Culver City, I know where to get it anyway. They could deliver it, they deliver it to me anyhow, or I'll go to Palmer's. We're not gonna relitigate what the council decided. The key is we regulate the heck out of the operators. We make sure we keep our eyes on this versus looking back and saying that we're getting all this money, but now we have a new problem. A concern that I have is funding it as far as who's gonna be enforcing this. These are things that we're gonna have to think about. That's my position on cannabis. Thank you.
All right, this is the part of our program where any of the candidates can respond or add for 1 minute. Response to either a specific statement made by their fellow candidates, or they can make an addition to what it is they were talking about themselves and their responses. Try to keep it very, very short. Try to keep it to the point. I will hold your feet to the fire. Who would like to respond for 1 minute? Let's go first, Mr. Lee.
Sure, and I'll be less than a minute. I will say that I am in favor of what current council member Megan Solly Wells has proposed in terms of any funds made from medical marijuana dispensaries or legal recreational marijuana dispensaries in Culver City, that a portion of those funds actually be used for drug prevention for teens. I think that's an effective use of the funds and would allay a lot of the fears that people have about these dispensaries, which are not open to people under 18, nevertheless being trafficked by them.
Mr. Vera. Mr. Fish will take you next.
Couple of comments. In terms of marijuana being a gateway drug, in recovery, and I've been through plenty of meetings and talking to people, in terms of statistics, 87% of the people really through recovery have used marijuana as a gateway drug. So I disagree. I believe it is a gateway drug. And it's something that I really don't invite into the city. In terms of using that money for drug prevention, it's sort of oxymoronic. We're taking drug money to use against prevention of drugs with children. That's
Mr. Fish.
Looks like you really will have a choice this election. I do not believe that marijuana is a gateway drug at all. I don't think there's any evidence for it, anecdotally or empirically. But I also would not earmark any funds in the city any more than we already earmark funds for any particular use. I think you, the voters, should put people on the council who share your values when we budget, so that we have drug prevention programs for teens anyway. I was just reading today that there's an explosion of crystal meth. That even as we have this opioid crisis in the rural areas of the country, there's a crystal meth crisis that's been completely under the radar. So we need to be aware of, really all youth drug issues. But I wouldn't tie up any more money than is already tied up in the various discretionary funds, non-discretionary funds, earmark funds, special purpose funds, intergovernment transfers. The budget's already a mess. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask a follow-up question, and all of you can.
Do I get to say something?
Mr. Tiggs, I didn't know you were.
All right.
And again, don't take any personal animus from this.
Okay. Okay, look, again, I don't think I'm going to relitigate what the existing council's decided on cannabis. But what I would say is the screening process for the operators needs to be impeccable. We can look at what LA City's done, we can pull from what they've done, the things that make sense for us. We can look at the state regulations that are talking about it. We can talk about as far as the security aspect, the video recording aspect, the hours, how they need to have their facade. There are a lot of things that we can do, that we can force these operators to be essentially good neighbors. And at the same token, we need to keep statistics from the PD on what's going on, so we know. So a year from now, we can know whether that operator is a good operator or not.
Let me ask a follow-up question to all of you on the question of marijuana. One of the issues that obviously is still needs to be addressed from a law enforcement point of view, and I'm going to give each of you a minute to answer this, is how the officers in Culver City are going to address the question of issues like driving under the influence. And now that there are no real tests or field sobriety tests that are out there to determine when someone's under the influence, tell us how you think the Culver City Police Department in general ought to be dealing with these questions. Let's go ahead and start then with you, Mr. Barrow.
That's a great question, John, and it's an interesting question. How do we? It's about retraining. We're going to have to really retrain all the officers out there in terms of testing. Until testing really is out and approved, there's really nothing we can do. It's something that really I think the PD needs to look into. We need to figure out the proper training, the proper techniques, but we have to retrain all the officers out in the field, so that's going to be that much more money that we spend on it.
Mr. Fish?
There are already people driving under the influence of every drug that's available, and our officers are already trained to the best that they can execute field sobriety tests and record the results of that test in their field report, or if necessary, in their as they charge a person who's booked for driving under the influence. It's imperfect, but they need to adhere to best standards. I don't think that City Council is qualified to check an objective best standards from other law enforcement agencies that our best practices, that our PD should be adhering to, and judge the police chief's ability to, his or her success in implementing those best practices. But I don't think council should be coming up with ad hoc policies about policing that is already taking place.
Mr. Tibbs.
I would look to the professionals. I would first look to Chief Bixby, see what his thoughts are on this. There are other cities, other states that have dealt with this very issue. There are people that are driving up high on some sort of, whether it's prescribed drugs, whether it's weed, whether it's cocaine, etc. I trust our police department kind of knows if someone is high. Now, they're going to either arrest that person, they're going to bring them in, or they're not going to do anything. But I trust the police department in Culver City are going to do the right thing. But we do need to look at what other police departments are doing, because it's not a new issue. It's not novel to Culver City. Other agencies have to deal with it. So the information is there, and we would look to the professionals to get their opinion, and then we decide how we want to do it.
Mr. Lee.
I guess I'll stand, since that seems to be the trend. There's already a large marketing campaign going on in the state of California right now to notify people that driving while intoxicated or a DUI already includes drugs besides alcohol. If we wanted to get specific in Culver City, I think the City Council could direct the police department to research best practices that specifically identify procedures for dealing with people who are inebriated on cannabis, and we can adopt those practices to our practice here in Culver City. But from a technical perspective, marijuana and intoxication from it is already included.
Thank you. Let's stay with law enforcement and public safety for a few moments. As some of you may know, it's always a live issue no matter what the election is going to be in what election cycle. I know that recently the city council just was addressing the issue of the use of drones here in Culver City for law enforcement purposes. But setting aside just the drones themselves, let's start then with you, Mr. Fish. Identify for us what you believe the #1 challenges are in public safety in Culver City and how you as a council member would address them.
I think we're pretty fortunate. One thing that I can always say to a former council member, regardless of any differences, is how grateful I am that we remain an independent, full-service city. It's a real blessing, and having our own police department is obviously part of that. And with that, they do a pretty good job. What I'm hearing out and about, however, is in certain neighborhoods, a dramatic increase in car burglaries and even other burglaries, so property crimes. I've seen the statistics. My understanding of them is we've seen a continued, decades-long decrease that's throughout urban United States of violent crimes, but recently a slight uptick, empirically and anecdotally, in certain neighborhoods of especially car burglaries. So I think that ties into, this may sound crazy, but housing affordability. I think that throughout California, people are having a real hard time making ends meet, even in a good economy, because it's tough to pay the rent. And I think that with 57,000 homeless people, you're going to see some people who are just trying to get a few bucks to eat. I think that that's something that PD should pay attention to, because I know that there are people who don't feel safe going for a walk in their neighborhood after dark.
Thank you. Let's go to you, Mr. Barrow.
Public safety it's a passion for me. I'm so proud of our police, all our public services, but our police department in general. I believe that we really need to supply our police department with all the tools necessary to provide the level of safety that we've all been accustomed to. I know in walking for campaigning certain areas, each area has their own sort of independent problems or issues that arise. Some of the areas there are car burglaries. In talking to Chief Bixby, he already implemented a SET team, which is a special enforcement team, where they go out there and they're really impacting the crime. They're impacting the areas during the hours that the crimes happen. They have bicycle patrols between 2 and 3 in the morning in certain areas, or guys on foot, things that they're doing proactively to catch these guys. I think the law changed where we're letting a lot of people back out of jail. I think law enforcement hands are tied. In the past, you could arrest somebody, take them off the street for a couple of days. Now it's like you catch somebody with some narcotics. Well, they take the narcotics, they write them a ticket out in the field, and they send them on their way. Well, now you got somebody who doesn't have their drugs anymore, doesn't have any money, but he's out in the field. So what is he going to do? He's going to break into a car to get some money or whatever he has to do to get his next high. So I think it's really, it's unfortunate the way the law system, the legal system changed things around and is tying law enforcement's hands.
Mr. Lee.
I would partially agree with Mr. Fish, just because personally in my building I've had 2 people have their cars broken into within the last year. I've heard from neighbors walking in Carlson Park area and other areas about a certain uptick in property type crime. I think one of the ways that the police department can really help to end that is to identify the neighborhoods that are the highest targets for crimes. Most of these are neighborhoods that are on our major thoroughfares, and concentrate police activity and patrols in those particular neighborhoods where the crimes are more likely to happen, and maybe transfer people from other neighborhoods into these areas where we have seen higher incidents. Secondly, I will say one thing that has been disturbing. I live a few blocks away here on College Avenue on the back end of La Bayona Elementary. And on Girard right there, and near actually many of our schools throughout the city, there is a habit, both of parents parking in the street, double parking illegally, which I have more compassion about, but there's a larger trend of people running stop signs near schools. And I think I think that's something that the police department could do more about enforcement on non-school hours, because there are a lot of programs that children take part in that are immediately after school, and there are a lot of that is principally the time when I see these things happening. So I think that's something that the police department could do more about.
Mr. Tibbs.
We all moved to Culver City and we stay in Culver City because of the quality of life. In that pyramid, the quality of life at the top is feeling safe. If we don't feel safe where we are, our quality of life, everything else does not matter. Overall, compared to other cities, we're pretty darn safe. That's not to say that